So I'm Sanjay Ramabhadran, the board chair of the Metropolitan Transit Authority of Harris County, otherwise called Houston Metro. By way of what Houston Metro does, we were created some 40 years back by the Texas legislature. Our service area is about 1,300 square miles, which is about the size of the state of Rhode Island. So the 4,100 women and men of Metro on a daily basis work to move over 6 million Houstonians across the region on multiple modes: light rail, bus rapid transit, local bus routes, regional park and ride express, Metro lift for the disabled, van pool, curb-to-curb service, and we also operate over 100 miles of high occupancy lanes, hot lanes, managed lanes that run down the middle of all of our highways in the Houston region. Our annual budget as of last year is about $1.8 billion. Most folks think about the transit agency as a mobility agency that runs buses and trains, but we are much more than that. We are a public service agency as well, because we are there when our customers need us the most, getting them to shelter when there is a flooding event or when there's a hurricane, providing a cooling bus for a firefighter. So we are moving them to critical livelihoods, to healthcare, even in the midst of a pandemic. So I want to talk to you all a little about bold decisions that have been made and continue to be made in the Houston region, how we are building for the future, while balancing the diverse needs of a growing region, and also adapting to what may be changing customer and consumer preferences. So if you think about it, the greater Houston region has a GDP of about $500 billion. And if we were our own nation, we would rank 26th globally in terms of the size of the economy. So we all agree that Houston and Texas has enjoyed some tremendous economic growth over the last several decades, while other parts of the country may have stalled a little bit. But that didn't happen by chance. That happened by design, because those that came before us made some bold decisions, some visionary choices. In the case of Houston, that's building a 53-mile ship channel to the Port of Houston, building 2 airports, 2 international airports, and now a spaceport, investing in our highway system, in our toll roads, securing water rights for a growing population, and so much more. But I would suggest that our continued economic growth is going to be inextricably tied to how we improve our quality of life. You heard previous panels talk about that as well. And public transportation and mobility is a huge part of that quality of life. We are truly in a global competition for businesses and talent, and our ability to attract and retain businesses and talent depends on how we solve for mobility. Because more so now than ever before, quality of life is a top consideration before people make decisions on where they want to call home. So if you ask pre-pandemic, let's go to the pre-pandemic numbers first. On a daily basis, during a weekday pre-pandemic, Houston Metro moves the entire population of the city of Atlanta, Georgia, across our region. That's what we do on a daily basis, 5 days a week. Pandemic has changed things a little bit. But if you ask the state, 37% of the downtown traffic comes in on a Metro asset. 28% of the Texas Medical Center workforce comes in on a Metro asset. That is the largest healthcare complex anywhere on the planet. Even at the height of the pandemic, we were still moving 100,000 people a day to critical livelihoods, including to healthcare centers across the region. Now, if you ask a state demographer, I think by the year 2050, Texas is going to go from about 29 million people to about 50 million people. What does it mean for the Houston region? That means we will go from about 6 million people right now to about 10 million. Is actually going to be closer to 11 million, again, depending on what the economy does, right? So today, Houston is the 4th largest city in the United States. If you take the population of unincorporated Harris County, that would be the 5th largest city in the United States. So we are already the 4th and 5th largest city sitting on top of ourselves. And what we're going to do over the next 20 years, 30 years, is to add the populations of the city of Austin, city of San Antonio, Corpus Christi, and Arlington on top of ourselves. Insane, right? So what do you think that's going to do for mobility and congestion? So that's the question that we put in front of the citizens of Houston and Harris County in 2019. And they too chose to make another bold decision and a visionary investment in what we call METRONext, up to a $3.5 billion in bonding capacity, which when combined with federal matching funds and other matching funds could result in up to $7.5 billion in investment over the next 20 years. This is Texas. So this did not come with any new taxes. No new taxes, no new source of revenue. This is just the ability to use. We are funded by a 1-cent sales tax. This is using that to be able to build for the future. Over the last 20 years, a quarter of that 1 cent, up to a quarter of that 1 cent, we gave back to the city of Houston, Harris County, and the 14 smaller cities so that they could build transportation projects. When it's a 1,300 square mile service area, it's difficult to get to every corner. This referendum continues that. Over the last 20 years, we've invested $3.7 billion through that general mobility program going back to our member entities. Over the next 20 years, in addition to the $7.5 billion, an additional $4 billion will go to the city of Houston, Harris County, and the smaller cities. This referendum passed with almost 70% of the vote. That's what we call a mandate. That means our responsibility now is to deliver on the promises of METRONext and accelerate the delivery where possible. So what does METRONext entail? Don't expect you all to be able to read this map. There is something in this for everybody in the greater Houston region. We are investing heavily in 75 miles of bus rapid transit along 4 corridors. We'll talk about 2 of those corridors, including connectivity to the Bush Intercontinental Airport on bus rapid transit. We are light rail light. We are building on investments that we've already made on light rail, extending the green and purple line, combining them and taking them to Hobby Airport, taking it to the municipal courts complex, where we've already made investments. Let's build on it. We are also working on what we're calling boost corridors, improvements along 17 of our high-frequency bus routes, far side bus stops, digital signage, traffic signal synchronization, priority where possible, essentially improving the customer experience and reducing travel times. We're also focusing on HOV lanes. What the commuter rail system is to the northeast, the HOV lanes are to Houston. Right now, it is single lane, reversible. But you know what's happened? Speaking of customer preferences and changing travel patterns, for the last 40 years, everybody moved to the burbs and drove into downtown to work. The millennials want to live downtown, midtown, and the heights, and they want to go work in the lands, Sugarland, Pearland, Woodlands, the suburbs. So it's clocked both ways in the morning. So we've got to adapt to accommodate those travel patterns that are changing. We're also investing heavily in universal accessibility that is going well above and beyond just meeting the requirements of the ADA. Again, it's about the customer experience. A better walk, a better stop, and a better ride is what builds ridership in the system. We've already improved 4,000 bus stops. Yes, you heard that right, 4,000 bus stops. We've got 9,000 bus stops in all. These will all be receiving shelters, security for security purposes and other purposes, LED lighting, and hopefully solar-powered fans as well, because it does get to 108 degrees in Houston every July and August. Let's talk a little bit about the Metro Rapid University BRT corridor, which we're currently working on. 1-seat, 25-mile corridor, which when built will be the longest BRT corridor anywhere in the United States. It connects to 8 of our transit centers, all 3 of our light rail lines, 12 of our high-frequency bus routes, over 50 of our local bus routes, and also multiple business districts. Game changer for the region. Why is it called the University Corridor? Because it connects the University of St. Thomas, Texas Southern University, the University of Houston, and multiple campuses of the Houston Community College system. We talked about the trade schools and the importance of that as well. The current enrollment in these schools is over 100,000. So let's remember who we are building this for. You and I are not going to change our driving patterns and travel patterns. We're building this for the next generation of Houstonians so they will continue to call Houston and Texas home. The other corridor that we're working on is the Inner Katy corridor, I-10, 26 lanes outside Loop 610 and going all the way out to Grand Parkway. A much needed east-west connectivity in Houston that'll connect the Galleria the Northwest Transit Center, to the Central Business District and the Convention Center, a dedicated lane, not just for our BRT vehicles, but also for park and ride that bring folks from the west and northwest of the region along I-10 and 290. This also then allows us to take some of the pressure on the general purpose lanes off so that TxDOT can build their managed lanes within the existing footprint of I-10. We've heard about collaboration and partnerships. This is working with TxDOT to see how do we best use the corridor to move people and goods. So today, again, pre-pandemic numbers, we did use about 235,000 auto trips. With the implementation of METRONext, we would have reduced over 500,000 auto trips would be eliminated on a daily basis. So imagine that future. When the 40 projects on METRONext are complete, we will have a region where our business districts and job centers, schools and universities, shops and grocery stores, hospitals and clinics, parks and recreational facilities are all connected by safe, reliable, frequent, accessible, and equitable multimodal transportation options. That's the future that we aspire for, and I believe that is the future that will allow us to continue to attract businesses and talent to Houston. So how are we going to get this done? It may sound cliche, but together we can do more than we can do by ourselves. We heard some pretty big numbers being thrown around. IIJA, $100 million for TxDOT. But the rate at which Texas is growing, we will always be resource constrained. There is simply not enough funding available to solve for all of our mobility problems. So it is how we can leverage each other's investments, work together, because we all have one thing in common: working to improve mobility for all Houstonians, for all Texans. We have a fabulous track record of working with our agency partners and our community stakeholders. TransStar is a shining example nationally of how to run traffic operations, emergency operations. That is a joint effort of the City of Houston, TxDOT, Harris County, and Metro. When it comes to TxDOT, all of our HOV lanes, including that bidirectional HOV, is on TxDOT's right-of-way. Our first BRT in the Houston region, the Silver Line, uses an elevated guideway for BRT along Loop 610, I believe in the top 5 congested corridors anywhere in Texas, anywhere in the United States. City of Houston, the University BRT corridor, 25-mile corridor, with the exception of the TxDOT crossings, every bit of that is along a City of Houston-owned right-of-way. So it's working with the city to see how do we maximize the throughput for people, not just vehicles, along that corridor. Everything from safety improvements, traffic improvements, drainage improvements, bike and pedestrian improvements, roadway improvements, and also transit improvements. So back in 2015, Houston Metro embarked on reimagining our local bus routes. We went from a wheel and spokes system to a grid system that reflected how our business districts had changed over the last 40 years. And pre-pandemic, we were one of 2 transit agencies anywhere in the United States we were actually seeing an increase in ridership, double-digit increase in ridership. The only other agency that had that was in Seattle, and they invested about $50 billion. And when you have folks from New York City and New Zealand come down to Houston to see what we did, we must be doing something right. Now it's time for us to reimagine our park and ride system, particularly after the pandemic. Historically, the way we did park and rides was you see soil, you pour concrete. It's a big old concrete parking lot. It's time to transform those parking lots into destinations. Mixed-use development, transit-oriented development, shopping on the first floor, a garage for our customers, housing and offices on the higher floors. We're talking about workforce housing. What do I mean by that? For our teachers, for our police officers, for our firefighters, it is absolutely beneficial both to the community and to the public servants when they live next to the communities that they serve. We are a little late to the TOD, Transit-Oriented Development Party in Houston, but we're learning from our friends at DART and working on joint development opportunities where we will partner with the private sector to develop on land owned by Metro. And TOD is to encourage private sector folks that want to build the density in and around transit corridors. We've already seen that property values within a quarter mile of our rail corridors has appreciated more than 25% compared to property anywhere else in Harris County. Those are not our numbers. Those are the county's appraisal district numbers. So imagine what this could look like. It's the same parking lot. Access to the HOV lanes so that you can get to all parts of town right from a transit center if you choose to live near or adjacent to it. So we're always building for the future, which means we should always be innovating. We now have Wi-Fi on all of our buses. We're working on Wi-Fi on all of our trains. We tested an autonomous shuttle on the campus of Texas Southern University on Tiger Walk pre-pandemic. We are now expanding on that to where we will have a bigger shuttle that is also fully ADA compliant to get us to the Purple Line rail station and eventually to the Eastwood Transit Center. Bluetooth beacons to assist the visually impaired on navigating our system. Today, anything and everything has to be done on an app. So we're working on combining two of our apps to where you can do your trip planning as well as buy your tickets at a single stop, if you will, a one-stop app. We're also working with the Autonomous Bus Consortium to see if we would be one of the first agencies, one of 10 agencies that will get an autonomous bus for service. First mile, last mile, particularly in a 1,300 square mile region, gets really critical. Biking has boomed during the pandemic. We now have an agreement with Houston Bike Share to where Houston Metro will absorb the bike service, and that'll be an added service that we offer that we hope will help us tremendously with first mile, last mile. Okay. Back in 2022, we adopted a climate action plan. We took delivery of our first electric bus. Our goal is to have only zero-emission vehicles being purchased after the year 2030. These will be deployed across the service region, including in underserved areas, solar panels at locations that we own real estate, looking at hydrogen fuel cells because we need a fleet mix. We are a region prone to hurricanes. All electric buses, loss of electricity, not good. Remember I said we are a public service agency. We are there when our customers need us the most. With METRONext and our climate action plan, we would have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by almost 1.5 billion pounds. I really want to talk about two things, philosophical conversation. How many of you couldn't wait to get a driver's license when you were eligible? Okay, only so many? Okay. How many of you know somebody that is 17 or 18 that's not in a big hurry to get a driver's license? Almost the same number of hands. That's never happened before. You know, we are at Infrastructure Day, but we need to be thinking about the softer side of infrastructure as well. We're never going to be future-proofing anything. We're kidding ourselves if we say we're going to future-proof, but can we be future-ready? The projects that we plan take 10, 20, 30 years to build. I'm not saying that we need to completely move to transit. Not at all what I'm saying. If 5 to 10% of the region adopts a different mode of moving around, it makes life simpler for the other 90%. Right? So let's think about what that future customer may want while we plan our projects. The other is, I think my friend from DOT touched on this, transit has always been viewed through a single metric, a single lens, ridership, ridership, ridership. Nationally, there is this conversation about value over ridership. I might offer a nuance to say, let's look at it as value beyond ridership, because ridership is still a very important metric. The other is, there are folks that will tell you, you know, transit is subsidized. You should be making a profit. Well, let me tell you this. If you can sell a bus ticket and a rail ticket for $1.25 and make a profit, it would be called private transit. It would not be called public transit. It exists for the greater collective good. There is a value beyond ridership. There's value beyond revenue. Frankly, there is value beyond mobility in the strictest definition of the term mobility, getting from point A to point B. We are not just in that mobility business. We are also in the socio-economic mobility business. It's about connecting people and housing to educational opportunities, giving them that escalator to a better future, to a better quality of life. It's connecting people and housing to job opportunities after the education so that the overall socioeconomic mobility of the region continues to get better. So that is the reason, making sure we've got choices, because the Houstonians and Texans of the future want to be able to choose whether to walk, bike, roll, drive, or our preference, be driven by metro to their destinations. And that is the reason multimodal transportation options are critical for a growing population. Thank you all very much.